This lesson looks at different programming constructs and while loops as well. So firstly, there are three different programming constructs that you need to know about. First is sequence, selection, and iteration. Now, sequence is the order of instructions that occur in any order. So it's just how the code is laid out. For example, name equals input, print name. This is just the order of instructions, the order of execution of instructions. So the line 1 will execute first, then line 2, then line 3, then line 4. This is called sequence. Then we have selection. Now selection determines the path that the program takes. Now here, name equals input, so we're asking for a name. Then we create an if statement. Now, depending on this condition, this algorithm will take different paths. Now, if it's true, if the name is so far, it will display welcome. Otherwise, it will display go away. Now, the algorithm will take different paths depending on that specific condition. And this is called selection. So anything to do with the if statement, that's always selection. Finally, we have iteration. So there are two types of iteration. Now, iteration is the repetition of a section of a program or code. Firstly, there is a count control loop, which is for loops, and then we have condition controlled loop, which is while loops. This is just an example of a for loop, and here is another example of a while loop. Now here we have a question that says, which programming construct was used in the above program? Now we can see here, this is just 4 different statements. So input, print, input, print, they're just normal sequence. Now here we have a for loop. So this is the repetition of something. This will repeat. Because this repetition is iteration, and it's also count controlled iteration because it's a for loop. Now here we have another question. We can clearly see, says which programming construct was used in the above program. Now here we have the top disinfectant equals input. So that's sequence, but then we have if disinfectant is equal to yes, that's selection. So technically for this question, there is a sequence right at the top. So sequence and selection as well. So sequence and selection. Here we have another example. It says num equals num1. We're asking a question, and then num2 asking a question, and then we just calculating the average and printing it. Now this is just a sequence because there are no if statements and there's no loops as well. Because there are no loops, no if statement, that's just sequence. Here we have another one. So it says which programming construct was used in the above program. Now line 1, this is just a normal input. Because it's a normal input, that's just a sequence. So we have sequence, but line 2, in line 2, there is iteration because there is a loop. So this one contains a sequence and iteration as well. Here we have another example. It says identify the line numbers where a sequence occurred. So sequence is in line 1 and 2 because these are just normal inputs. Then line 3 is where selection starts. So line 3 to line 6, which is the end. So line 3 to line 6. All of that is selection because it's an if statement. And you take in different paths depending on the algorithm. Now it says identify the line number where iteration starts. Now iteration is loops, so for loop or while loops, and that starts in line 1. So line 1 contains iteration. Then we have says identify the line number where selection starts. Now selection starts in line 3 because that's where the if statement starts. So line 3 contains the selection.